Good morning everyone. Basahan tayo nating libro guys. History of the Filipino People by Agoncillo and Guerrero. 02 December 2022 today. History of the Filipino People. Nasa part 2 pa rin tayo. The Spanish Period. Topic number 7 na. Topic number 7. Resistance against Spanish rule. Basa. Resistance against Spanish rule. Topic number 7 na yan ha. Almost everywhere in the Philippines, the Filipinos opposed the imposition of Spanish sovereignty and the reduction to vassalage. The Spaniards, however, invariably triumphed because the native institution, skills, and ideas which the people employed to resist them were pathetically inadequate against the latter's military superiority and political organization. Moreover, the weakening of native political authority and the subsequent assimilation of many native ruling chieftains into the colonial bureaucracy left the natives with little or no real leadership. The failure of the native priests and elders to preserve the old religion, as well as the zeal, the persuasive efforts of the early missionaries led many natives to embrace Christianity. The incorporation into Christianity of certain debilitating aspects of pre-colonial superstitions and the manipulations of the new religion by a strong prior class to assure the entrenchment of Spanish power in the Philippines discouraged or inhibited resistance to Spanish rule and fostered docility and resignation to the social order established by the conquerors. The miserable conditions brought about by Spanish political and economic policies threw the natives into rebellion against the ruling power. The Spaniards suppressed these frequent though indecisive uprisings with ruthless severity in certain the natives in certain instances the brutality with mali kasi ako nang basa lumaktaw. Okay, pakibuksan nyo rin yung libro nyo guys. Libro natin to ng college natin, History of the Filipino People. Kaya ganun na siya katagal guys, kasi college days ko pa to 1985 pa. So, ito na tayo. Ulitin ko lang ha. In certain instances, the brutality with which these uprisings were quelled benumbed the natives into passiveness and sullen apathy. Thus, in every century of the ancient regime until the Philippine Revolution of 1896. Pinaliktad lang Ulit. Thus, in every century of the ancient regime until the Philippine Revolution of 1896, Spanish colonial policy produced a chronic state of alternating lethargy and rebelliousness among the people. Agitation against Spanish rule, however, grew in intensity with the development of national consciousness in the 19th century. To be sure, even before this time, the similarities in the abuses perpetrated throughout the colony, as well as the overwhelming racial prejudice of the Spaniards, combined to bring about a community of grievances against the colonial masters. But it was self-seeking Spanish colonialism itself that unwittingly and unconsciously sowed the seeds of nationalism. The Spaniards undoubtedly rejoiced at the stabilization of the colonial economy resulting from the opening of the Philippines to world commerce in the last half of the 19th century. But the termination of Spain's policy of sequestration also resulted in political and intellectual innovations and helped develop the feeling of nationalism among the Filipino. Guys, tanong ko lang no, di ba, siyempre tayong mga Pilipino, ang history to is nag-umpisa na kaagad sa Spanish nung sinakop tayo ng Spaniard. Paano na yung year 1? Kasi 1500 na ito, nasa 1500 na ito, diba? 1521. Paano na yung before 1521 na sinakop tayo ng na pumunta sa atin yung mga Kastila? So, yun ang malaking tanong sa akin eh. Ano yung pamumuhay natin nung araw? Pero nakalagay nga kasi, diba, before yung mga Kastila is, Malaysian race tayo. Kaya dapat guys talaga basahin nyo rin yung history nyo na kung saan country kayo. Para alam nyo kung saan kayo nagmula. Okay. Ano ba? Ngayon lang kasi ako nagka-interest nito eh. Kung kailan din tayo nag-aral. Nandito tayo sa paragraph Uprising against Spain causes. In the early decades of Spanish rural revolts against Spain had been sparked by native chieftains and religious leaders. Though the pre-Spanish rulers had been retained by the government, they nevertheless resented the loss of power, status, and influence. The native priests who had controlled the craft of magic and idolatry lost most of their powers to the Christian missionaries. Understandably, some babaylans and Catalanas rose in an attempt to regain their waning influence over the populace. Some individuals fomented rebellion among the natives for still more personal reasons, such as the desire to avenge some wrongs done to them or to members of their families. As the Spaniards became more entrenched in the Philippines, native uprisings, whether small or large scale, were staged in response to a combination of these causes, as well as to intolerable conditions of land tenure, excessive taxation, forced labor, and other practices used to maintain Spanish hegemony in the colony. A. Personal grievances. The uprising led by Lakendula and Sulaiman 1574, the conspiracy of 1587 to 1588, as well as the revolts of Tamblot 1621 to 1622 and Bangkao 1621 or 1622, were all caused by personal dissatisfaction with Spanish rule, disenchanted with ill-kept promises of the Spaniards that they and their descendants would be exempted from taxation. Lacandola, Raja of Tondo, and his nephew Raja Sulaiman attacked the newly established Spanish citadel in Manila. Salcedo's intervention and assurance that Spanish promises would be kept aborted the revolt. In 1587, Martin Panga and Agustin. Kita mo guys, so before pa ang mga Spanish, may mga radya na tayo sa Maynila. So yung mga to is matataas na yan guys. Matataas na, what I mean is nasa high level na sila ng, diba hindi ka naman tatawagin na radya kung hindi ka in high position sa sa Philippines. Okay, nakalagay Raja Sulaiman attacked the newly established Spanish citadel in Manila. Salcedo's intervention and assurance that the Spanish promises would be kept aborted the revolt. In 1587, Martin Panga and Agustin de Legazpi, relatives of Lacandola, led a conspiracy to overthrow Spanish sovereignty in the Philippines. Among those who joined the attempt to regain the freedom and lordship which their fathers had enjoyed before them were the former rulers of Tondo, Polo, Pandacan, Nabotas, Candaba, Coyo, and Calamianes. Mga lugar yan sa Manila, guys. Ang kabisado ko lang is itong Tondo, Pandacan, Nabotas. Yung Candaba, Coyo, and Calamianes, di ko pa napupuntahan. The Filipino chieftains solicited the assistance of the Borneos as well as two Japanese seamen in their plot against the Spaniards. In return, the conspirators agreed to share half of the tribute. The Filipino chieftains solicited the assistance of the Borneans as well as the Japanese seamen in their plot against the Spaniards. In return, the conspirators agreed to share half of the tributes from their subjects with their allies. A native spy, Antonio Rabao, informed the Spaniards of the plot, leading to the arrest and execution of the leaders of the conspiracy. May spy pa talaga. The other plotters were either exiled to Mexico or to distant places in the Philippines. Na-exiled yung mga guys. The other plotters were either exiled to Mexico or to distant places in the Philippines. In the 17th century, two rebellions of a religious nature occurred in the Visayas. The leaders of the uprisings, motivated by a desire to return to the old religion, induced the natives to abandon Christianity. In 1621, a native priest or babaylan called Tamblot rallied hundreds of Boholanos to his cause. A Spanish expedition from Cebu, consisting of no more than 50 Spanish soldiers, ably aided by more than 1,500 Filipinos, subdued the revolt. In 1622, Bangkao chief of Limasawa, who earlier had been converted to Christianity, led revolt for the purpose of restoring the old religion. The movement spread throughout the villages of Leyte, but again a Spanish-Filipino expedition dispatched from Cebu quelled an uprising in a short time. The government severely punished the perpetrators of these religious disturbances to inspire awe and fear among the Filipinos. Fear of the harsh repression that the government might mete out did not deter the natives from showing their disenchantment with the Spanish power. In 1744, the Gohoy, angered and humiliated by the refusal of a Jesuit priest to give a Christian burial to his brother, incited the natives of Bohol to revolt. The immediate cause of the rebellion was hardly any reason for anyone unrelated to the Gohoy to take up arms against the Spaniards. The Jesuits' refusal was, after all, firmly anchored on church laws that prohibited Christian burial for the Filipino who had been killed in a duel. Yet the Gohoy won a great following from among those who had been subjected to humiliation, cheating, and cruelty. The Spaniards found it difficult to subdue the movement, which at its height involved as many as 20,000 rebels. The Gohoy and his men escaped to the mountains in an attempt to lead a life free from the harsh impositions of the authorities. After 85 years and several futile expeditions, the government finally suppressed the revolt initiated by the Gohoy. The Terbi opposition to Spanish impositions. From a distance, the revolts which ravaged the countryside during the 17th and 18th centuries differed from one another in many ways, and didn't at the time they occurred but a revolt against labor conscription in Samar, an uprising in Pangasinan against the unjust and cruel system of taxation, and another revolt in the Ilocos against the vexatious Basip monopoly. Despite their difference in magnitude, their distance in terms of time and scope were one and the same expression of disillusionment with the ruling power. When Spanish demands and exaction became intolerable, some of these manifestations of discontent, though in the beginning unusually and eventful, crossed Luzon and the Visayas and spread like brush fires. It was in this manner that the revolts of Magalat 1596, Somoroy 1649 to 1650, the Pampango, Pangasinan, Ilocos Uprising 1660 to 1661, the Palares Revolt 1762 to 64 and the Jigo-Silang Revolt 1762 to 1763 took place. In 1596, the arbitrary and illegal collection of the tribute, among other objectionable aspects of Spanish rule, caused the revolt that Magalat fomented in Cagayan. Native assassins hired by the Spaniards liquidated Magalat. Instead served to dishearten and disperse the rebels in summer. On the other hand, Sumuroy, Juan Ponce, and Pedro Caamog led an uprising against Governor Diego Fajardo's order requiring the conscription of Polistas from the Visayas for the shipyards of Cavite. The rebellion spread to Albay and Camarines, Cebu, Masbate, and even to as far as northern Mindanao. In 1650, a government expedition composed of Spaniards and native mercenary soldiers captured the leaders of the movement in the mountains of Samar, after which they easily suppressed the revolt. Uprising took place almost simultaneously in the provinces of Pampanga, Pangasinan, and Ilocos in the middle of the 17th century. Pampanga, rich rice and timber producing region, suffered greatly from the disrupted effects of the Polo and Mandala system. In 1660, Francisco Maniago led the natives of the province in a revolt against the government practice of forcing them to cut timber and hauling them to Cavite for the construction of the galleons. The natives also revolted because of the arrears and paid due them to this rice forcibly collected from them through the notorious Bandala system, together with the labor services, which also remained unpaid. In 1660, the unpaid dues amounted to more than 200,000 pesos. The government used every expediency for both force and peaceful persuasion to end the rebellion in Pampanga. Where force was necessary, they used the Macabebes to repress the rebels. They commissioned Juan Macapagal, chief of Arayat, to be the master of camp in the Spanish army. They also employed the parish priest and other native chiefs to weaken the movement. The use of mercenary soldiers and native chieftains served to demoralize the natives. The Spaniards concluded an agreement with Maniago that granted general amnesty to the rebels and provided partial payment of its debts to the people of Pampanga. The Polo and Bandala system, however, continued to be implemented after the revolt. The natives of Pangasinan and Ilocos, following the example of the Pampangos, rose in arms against the government. Andres Malong headed the uprising in Pangasinan, which soon spread to Pampanga, Ilocos, Zambales, and Cagayan. Heartened by the growing number of his followers, Malong proclaimed himself king and appointed his military leaders to take care of distant outposts of the areas under rebel control, weakening in the process on defenses. In the capital town of Binalatugan, the Spaniards employed in many-pronged campaign against the rebels and captured Malong before reinforcements could come from his aid. Malong was finally Malong was finally to death along with the other leaders of the revolt. The fires of rebellion led by the Pampangos also reached the Ilocos. The Ilocanos took up arms against the Spaniards and proclaimed their leader, Pedro Almazan, king of the province. The rebels gained some headway in the beginning, but the Spaniards eventually suppressed the revolt. The humiliating defeat of the Spaniards in the hands of the British during the 7 Years' War and the subsequent occupation of Manila by British troops from India disenchanted many Filipinos by the Spanish inability to protect the Philippines from outside aggression, and thus exposed the myth of Spanish invincibility. In 1762, the natives of Binalatungan, Pangasinan, taking advantage of the situation, broke out in the revolt, demanding the abolition of the tribute and the removal of Joaquin Gamboa, alcalde-mayor of the province, who had been committing irregularities in tribute collection. The Spaniards subdued the rebels in Bayambang. Juan de la Cruz Palaris of Binalatungan, however, continued the resistance, which spread throughout the province. The Spanish authorities were constrained to remove Gamboa, even so the rebellion continued until it was harshly suppressed in March 1764. Palaris was publicly hanged in the Palaris was publicly hanged. Binitay siya, guys. And the Ilocos complains about the anomalous collection of tribute and the excesses of the alcaldes mayores and the exercise of the indulto de comercio climax into an uprising led by Chico Silang, taking advantage of the Spanish preoccupation with the British in Manila. Silang started the revolt in Vigan, Ilocos Sur, and extended it to as far as Pangasinan and the Cagayan Valley. The Ilocanos acknowledged Silang as chief over a large area north and south of Vigan. He in turn issued orders abolishing the tribute and forced labor, while collecting a massive force in Pampanga that would be sent against Silang. Governor Simon D. Anda Y. Salazar issued an ultimatum to the rebel leader. The latter, realizing that his ill-trained and ill-equipped army would buckle down before the Spanish forces offered his services to the British, the British appointed him alcalde mayor and sargento mayor of Ilocos, with the power to appoint subordinate officials. In the face of the government's inability to contain the rebellion, the church felt constrained to assert Spanish supremacy over the rebels. Bishop Ostaris Bertuoli, a prisoner in Vigan, issued an interdict against Silang and his followers and exhorted the people to stop supporting the rebel leader. The Ilocanos, heeding the call of the pulpit, turned against Silang and fought with the Spaniards against the rebels, with the obvious approval of the Bishop Miguel Vicos, a Spanish mestizo who wished to take revenge on Silang, and Pedro Becbec, an old friend and trusted aide of Silang, conspired to assassinate the rebel leader. While the priest and the religious fervently prayed in a solemn Te Deum, Vicos proceeded to carry out his dastardly plot and treacherously shot Silang in the latter's own house. The death of Silang weakened but did not end the revolt, because his wife Gabriela and his uncle Nicolas Carreño continued the resistance. A strong Spanish force, complemented by native volunteers of mercenary soldiers, crushed the rebellion and executed its leaders. Bukas na tong literacy, guys, religious uprisings. So, pang December 3 na natin to bukas. For December 3, 2022. Bukas na yung literacy, mahaba-haba pala yan. Bye everyone, God bless.